Thank you, everybody, for coming. Really excited to do the second class in this series. And the topic that we're talking about this morning is maybe the most important center of Kabbalah. It's the most important part of Kabbalah. And this is the Shechinah, the feminine aspect of God. What exactly does that even mean, right? What exactly does it mean that there's a feminine aspect to God, and how does it impact anything? So we'll be talking about all of that. But just to give a little preview, the Shechinah, the feminine aspect of God, has been understood as a protective power that protects people, and that from physical harm, from disease. It's seen as a power that also destroys. Sometimes to destroy the old, to bring in the new. It's seen as an intensifier, the kind of, when you have it in your life, it gives you creativity and intensifies everything inside of you and has you experience things you've never experienced before. It's also a power that unites heaven and earth, that can literally change the fabric of this very world. And according to the Kabbalists, it's the very reason the Jewish people are in this world, is to be a vessel for this power in this world. The Shechinah is the feminine aspect of God. And it's what's been lacking in the Jewish people since the temple was destroyed, because it's considered that it dwelt in the temple in a certain way. And we'll talk about all of this much more in detail. And for the Kabbalists, in some ways, the essence of all of Judaism becomes the Shechinah. And the Kabbalists imagined themselves as they were there to draw in the Kabbalah and to devote themselves to the Shechinah, devote themselves to the Shechinah in everything they did. And so we think of ourselves as a patriarchal religion, right? And there's so many things in our religion where it's more centered on the male, right? And look, after all, you read, God is a who, and the who in Hebrew is a he. So God is a he, and traditionally, men are at the center of the religion, right? Men are the ones who put on the tefillin traditionally, and who are counted in the minyan. And it's only in recent times that that's opened up to be more egalitarian. So we think of ourselves as a patriarchal religion, but at least since the Kabbalists, which is about 1,000 years ago, or 1200, they saw it as, even though on the outside we're a patriarchal religion, on the inside we're a religion that's really focused on the feminine aspect of God. And that's like the biggest secret of Judaism. The biggest secret of Judaism is that actually on the inside, the purpose of everything we're doing is to be devoted to the feminine aspect of God. And it's, again, it was considered to be first for 1,000. What the Kabbalists believe is they were continuing a tradition that was going on already for thousands of years, of making the feminine the center of all of Judaism, but that they brought it out into the light 1,000 years ago, and they started to bring in more and more. And right, we'll be talking about it later, but when we have our Friday night service, we talk about the bride Shabbat. Right? So in some ways, that's the most outward place where that's been revealed in mainstream Judaism. And the prayer Lecha Dodi, which is the center of the Friday night service, is literally completely about the Shechinah and about this feminine presence of God. So this may be a little bit of history about it. Originally, when the rabbis used the word Shechinah, it was only concerning the presence of God. It wasn't feminine, but then over time it took on a feminine embodiment, which is right, the bride Shabbat and all of this. And then about 1,000 years ago, when the Kabbalists wrote the Zohar and everything, it became completely about the Shechinah. And so it changes a lot, and we'll talk about is how you would orient all of Judaism to look at it in this way, with the feminine aspect of God. Go ahead.
I just had a quick question.
Go for it,
Some
yeah.
of my Kabbalist friends say
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the reason women don't have to pray the way the men do is because the women are already evolved.
Already holy, yeah, exactly.
Have you heard that before?
Sure, yeah, I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
It's a common thing among more orthodox people. So the reason women don't have to do all those things because they're intrinsically holier than men. So you don't have to do anything. You can just if you don't go to synagogue, it doesn't matter because you're already holy. If you don't pray, it doesn't matter because you're already holy. And to some degree, what I think it's doing is taking something that existed before the Kabbalah, which was a patriarchal Judaism, and then once they start talking about how important the feminine was, they say that was a way of reconciling it and of keeping the status quo. I personally never found that to be a satisfying, answer, and kind of felt a little bit of an apologetic kind of way for the imbalance and for the way things were culturally 2,000 years ago. And so I think putting the Shechinah in this way in the middle creates a really beautiful vision of Judaism, and a really interesting and rich vision of Judaism. And we'll see all the different ways that becomes reality. So I want to, for some of us, we're at our congregational trip in Israel a few years ago. Some of you are going to Israel soon. And often people who were on that trip said that one of the greatest parts of that trip was when we went to the Western Wall on the Friday night. And people were praying, and suddenly there was just such an amazing atmosphere. Like people were just singing and praying, kind of totally taken up in the spirit, right? It was so alive, right?
You know what the best part was? We ran into my daughter-in-law's aunt, uncle, cousins, and it was like, here we are in Israel.
It was like suddenly there was all these people
ran into
there.
friends.
Suddenly running into friends there, and
it was unbelievable.
Everybody was there, and there was and so Eric Fogel, right, who was our president at the time, he told me afterwards, this is like a highlight, one of the highlights.
It was great because there were so many people, young, old, men, women, kids.
And there was such a feeling of it being alive.
Mm-hmm. That's the spiritual part.
The spiritual part, right? That's the spirit. And you can't get that everywhere, right? You can come and you can try and recreate it, but and so that's like one tiny part of what the Shechinah is considered to do, because it's considered to be like a feeling of an energy, so to speak, that intensifies spiritual experience. And so that was, and if there's anywhere that it should be, it's there, because the wall is the last remnant of the temple, and the temple was supposed to be the place where that intense energy was held. And it makes a religious experience alive. And the way it was considered, this is traditional Judaism, it's not even Kabbalistic Judaism, but that inside the temple, there was that presence that was held really, really powerfully, right?
Yes.
I mean, why do we weep the destruction of this temple 2,000 years later, right? There's many religions have had temples have been destroyed, but we're the only religion that still weeps over a temple that was destroyed 2,000 years ago. And the traditional reason why we say we weep over that destruction of the temple is because we feel that God's presence was there. What is God's presence? Is the Shechinah, and that somehow, of course, God is everywhere, but there was some level of presence and energy, divine energy that was present there that enabled something really, really special to happen at that period, right? That was a period when the Bible was created. This tiny little culture of a few million people created the book, the most important book of history. How did that happen? Because that presence was there at that moment and it radiated out. And how is prophecy possible? What is prophecy? Prophecy, we believe, is when you can hear God's literal word talking to you. God, it seems incredible, it seems out of bounds, right, to us. But they say that was possible because of that presence being there in the temple and radiating out. We'll get more and more of how that was understood. But so the temple had that area had that, and there's all kinds of reasons why that happened. And so really, we're doing one class on the Shechinah, but one could do a whole year worth of classes on the Shechinah. And I'm indebted to a lot of my father's work regarding this, because I grew up with a lot of this content, and he recently did he did a whole year-long course on this, and him and I spent a long time talking about it. So I am indebted to him. But again, I think this is really an interesting way to look at everything. And ultimately, when we say that this is the very mission of the Jewish people, so we talk a lot about tikkun olam in our days, right? The fixing of the world. And originally, the idea of the fixing of the world, tikkun olam, was actually a mystical idea, a Kabbalistic idea. It wasn't social justice. That's where the term came from. And it was about spiritual healing of the world. And that the spiritual healing of the world happens at the same time as the physical healing of the world. And if you heal the world spiritually, you're also helping heal the world physically, kind of go hand in hand. And so it says in even one of our oldest prayers, the Aleinu prayer that we say at the end of every service, part of it we say, Letaken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to fix the world with the kingdom of heaven. And so there's this idea in Kabbalah, and even if you go back to the prophets, right, the idea of the wolf lying down with the lamb, and all these ideas are kind of like the goal of Judaism, right? That one day there'll be peace. One day the whole world itself will be transformed, that the fabric of our world will be so full of love that there won't be war and there won't be all this. And so the vehicle in Kabbalah for making that transformation is the Shechinah. That there's this force, and this force literally unites heaven and earth. It can bring down that peace and love that we consider to be the realm of the heaven, and bring it into this very reality. And that's what that force does, this energy does. It bridges spirit and matter and is a vehicle for that to come. It can change people's hearts, can change a person who's hateful to being a person of love. It can refine human nature. It can change the very nature of this world. And so, as I was saying, in the way we think about it in ancient times, right? Why did God create the Jewish people? God said, will you be a kingdom of priests? And the people in one of their greatest moments said, okay, I'll do it, we'll do it. And then they kind of said, wait a second, they built the golden calf. But before that, they said, yes, we'll do it. And according to Kabbalists, what did this mean? That the people agreed that they would help create an anchor for God's presence in the world, that they would create a way for this presence, for this energy to come into the world. Why? Because it would change the morals of not just them, but eventually the whole world. It would change the ethics of the whole world. And we see how that actually came to be, right? And the way that the Ten Commandments then became the basis of Christianity, and also Islam comes out of it. So 1 billion people in some ways are following that download that happened all the way back then. And so that download wasn't only in ideas, but it was also in a state of consciousness of how to live with those ideas. And so the Shekhinah carries with it more refinement. It's kind of like an energy that refines the world. And also it's a healing power. And so I was thinking about this before. I think in our room, we have a good amount of therapists here this morning. And so I would say, how could you relate this in a real life terms also? So if one is with a client, for example, and there's a moment that you've been building towards for decades, whether purposefully or not purposefully, and somehow there's a breakthrough where suddenly they're able to completely see their life in a different way, where suddenly there's a moment of openness where something happens inside them where they're able to shift. And it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it happens over a long time, and suddenly there's like a breakthrough. Or for people who've been through therapy, we also talk about breakthrough moments. And that somehow the Shekhinah, this is the power that's helping to make that breakthrough happen, to kind of take way of thinking that's been a groove for 20, 30 years, and suddenly shift that groove. And that you need something powerful. So this is this energy that does that. It's also the power that's considered to lift us up, to have a spiritual experience, but also the most amazing acts of creativity that human beings are capable of happen through the power of this feminine presence. That's the way the Kabbalists understood. So whether it's a Michelangelo and creating the most beautiful act of work of art, or if it's Einstein in his mind, a mind empowered with this energy is what can allow you to think at these levels that have never been thought about and bring in something. So it's this power that's available to humanity that's associated with the feminine, and the human beings can harness it in their lives to do incredible things. That's part of how it's seen. And there's also the Kabbalists, they say, this is what God, this is the part of God that created the universe, the feminine, right? The feminine is the creative power, it brings new life. It's like the womb, the divine mother. And that's when it says, Breshit bara Elohim, when God created the world at the beginning of Genesis, however many billions of years that took, that's the feminine aspect that did that. And so from this aspect, this is what the Kabbalists believe. All the rules of Judaism, and how many rules do we have? Hundreds, right? All of that was to create a way to hold this special presence in the world for us, but for all of humanity. So even the way you had in the biblical times, you had all these priests and they had all these rules of how they should live and act and think and be. And that was all because to hold this kind of presence, you have to live a certain way. And so God was dedicating a people to live a certain way to be able to hold his presence in the world. And you see what it created. It created the Bible. It created the basics of monotheistic religion and a certain part of Western society. And so to hold this presence in the world, you have to live a certain way. And that's where all these rules of Judaism were about, and people were so much less evolved back then, they needed an even bigger jump. So God said, here are all these rules of how you live. And if you live these lives morally, ethically, then you will be a vessel for this presence to come into the world and to transform the whole world. And that's how the Kabbalists saw the entirety of Judaism. And then God said, well, why was there a tabernacle? Why was there then a temple? Because you needed something to really hold. It's a tangible energy. You needed a space, a holy space to really hold it. And then people could go to it 3 times a year, 4 times a year and imbibe it. And that would give them that creativity and that sense of living presence and of God being real and of mysticism being real. And they go take it back to their lives and take it to the world. This is pretty intense stuff. Anybody have any thoughts or questions before we read first text?
I always have believed that the reason so many non-Jews are into Kabbalah is because they're lacking something in their own religion and lives.
Yeah, I think, the Kabbalah is all about this alive aspect of religion, and there's a reason why it's popular everywhere. And
She has a question.
oh, go ahead. Who has a question? Hinda, go ahead. We can't hear you. You're on mute. Hinda, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yes, I was just wondering, last Shabbat in Bachel, we read about the building of the Mishkan.
Yes.
And listening to you, I'm wondering, is the spirit of the Shechinah also part of the Mishkan? God's presence was there for a reason. And could it be that the Shechinah was also present in that tabernacle, in that Mishkan?
It was that, and that's exactly the whole purpose, right? The tabernacle was the precursor to the temple. There was a tent that went around with the Israelites in the desert, there are endless details of how it had to be constructed, this material and that material, and how all the worship had to be done. And there is this incredible story in it that happens later, where the sons of Aaron rush into the tabernacle and they come with an offering that wasn't ordained, and they weren't supposed to go in at that time, and they get killed. And the way our tradition understands it is that the Shechinah energy, when it's at its most concentrated, powerful, it's so powerful, if you're, not everybody can approach it. It's like atomic energy. It's literally the most powerful energy in the world. So Aaron's sons walked into it and they weren't ready. Boom, they got, and this is why we have this tradition. I mean, it's all so powerful, right? But the high priest, when he would go into the Holy of Holies once a year in the temple itself. And again, there was this tradition that the divine presence, this energy was so powerful and concentrated that he could only go in if he'd done all the preparations, a week of preparations before. And if he wasn't spiritually ready, they tied a red string around his foot and they would pull him out because he would die. Because he wasn't prepared to go into it. But on the other hand, if he went into it and he was ready and he would commune or imbibe what was in there, he would then go back out, and there were the entire Jewish people were congregated, and he would say God's name, and everybody would fall on their faces, and the whole people would be cleansed for the whole year. That's kind of the power. That's how this power that's most kind of pristine form was seen to be was understood. Go ahead.
So you talk about a time when heaven will come down to earth.
Yes.
When will that happen? Do we need more consciousness? Is it like a scale where more people are aware of this? Do we need more righteous people? And if that happens, if everything is so wonderful, why do we even need a physical world?
Beautiful question. I mean, I think that it's totally right. Well, it's like a balance. Once you hit a certain, this is the way it's understood. Once you hit a certain amount of people living with this in a certain amount of volume, then the whole place will be transformed, right? And I mean, just to understand it in a way that maybe is relatable, I think we all experience this in our lives. There's certain places where you go and you feel that anything can happen there. Good, I mean, in terms of bad more, because that's the consciousness of that place. You feel worried. You walk down a street that feels bad. You feel anything can happen here because that's the energy of that place, right? And then you go to another place and you feel completely safe. Like only good things can happen here, probably because of the people who are there and this and that. That's just the atmosphere of being in that space. Now, if everybody in the world was living in a place of love and unity, then that's going to be the vibe of the whole world. And only good thing because there just won't be space for the lower nature of human beings to even come up in that space. But then we're still a long way from there. But there are more and more pockets in this world where that exists. I mean, even you look at medieval times, and pretty much anywhere you lived, there could be pillaging and rampaging going on any moment. And even though we still have horrible places in this world, and even in places that are considered to be not so horrible things happen, but there are many places where human beings feel basically safe and are able to live. And I think we're slowly evolving, and we're at a time in our history where this presence, I think, is coming back into the world. It's been gone for a while, and more people are interested in this. And this is a way we're hoping that the humanity, with all the difficulty, is also accelerating its kind of growth and coming to a place. And what we need is physical worlds. I mean, maybe we will get to a place where either it all merged together and we'll be able to live in a place of light, even being here, or maybe we'll live in a place, maybe human beings, who knows what we'll be, will be living in a different reality as much here as somewhere else. I mean,
We'll be avatars like that movie.
yeah. Well, that's a very concrete way of looking at that, right? I don't know if it will be quite as concrete. It'll be more a spiritual way. But in ancient times, the prophets, you see their visions, and they were living from that place because they kept telling the people, why aren't you taking care of other people? Why aren't you treating them well? Because they were living in that space. They were living in that space where all the people around them were living in a different space. Everybody around them were kind of corrupt and doing whatever they wanted. But the prophets were, and they felt it so deeply because they were living in that lofty place. And they were like, what are you guys doing? Life can be so full of love. Why aren't you taking care of the orphan and the widow and the this? And they could feel it so deeply because they were living in it. But their words are also powerful because they were living with this. And so it was coming from a place of experience. They weren't just intellectually thinking about it, they were feeling it. And that's why their words still speak to us with such power, thousands of years later. So
Isn't
go
the
ahead.
fact that, we're talking, average
Yes.
people are discussing Kabbalah, whereas, it used to have all these restrictions, we're that we're more ready for this, whereas in those days, we weren't ready to hear, people couldn't accept that concept.
I think that's completely true. It was even Kabbalah, you got to be 40 years old and a male and married to be able to even study this stuff. And I think people are more open and more ready to hear about this. But it's always been there in the back of the Jewish people, hidden or not so hidden. And having the Hamsa sign, right? That's a Kabbalistic sign, and there've been so much until Kabbalah has been behind Judaism for 1,000 years now, at least, if not more. So we have this idea that basically in ancient Israel, it was really, really alive. You had the prophecy, you had the temple. It was, we're about to read about one biblical text of many that shows us what it was like to live in biblical times with this powerful aspect. But then it was preserved in secret, and then the Kabbalists brought it out, and then it was part of Judaism and in other ways. So let's read this text. Alan, would you mind reading for us since you're here now, as a designated reader?
The official reader.
Samuel.
Is the text available online for those of us at home?
Wasn't it sent with the email?
This one's put together upside down.
Yeah, this one.
It's funny.
Yeah, sorry about that. Does anybody online have it?
Stand on your head to read it.
Does anybody online have that text? No? Okay, so I will make sure to send it to everybody. I thought, sorry about that. Let's see, give me 1 second and I will send it to everybody who is there.
You just stand on your head, that's all. Oh, that's good.
Nice practice.
Okay,
So helpful.
so I will send it. So I see the classes there, and I see Ed and Judy Sachs, and I see Morris and Brenda,
Kay Greenfield,
and Kay,
Carol and Herb are next.
and Carol.
The copies are in an email that came out earlier than the one.
Yeah, okay.
It's just copy of the materials, the email that
Okay.
came.
Okay, and Myra and
You get Hinda
okay.
and Kira.
Okay, so I'm going to send this out to all of you. If you haven't got it, you should get it. And the first text is just a biblical text from the book of Saul. And one of my favorite part of reading some of these books of the Bible is they give you a little window to what it's like to live with this intense spiritual aliveness, where spiritual experience is just part of life. It's not something that's hidden away, but it's real and just part of life. And And it's just talked about as if it was completely regular. And we see how powerful it was. It wasn't just, okay, I'm davening for 3 hours to get a little glimpse of something. It was something that was just easily accessible. So go ahead, Alan.
As Saul turned around to leave Samuel.
Samuel was a prophet, and Saul would become king of Israel, but go ahead, yeah.
God gave him another heart, and all those signs were fulfilled that same day. And when they came there to the hill, he saw a band of prophets coming toward him. Thereupon the Spirit of God gripped him, and he spoke in ecstasy among them. When all who knew him previously saw him speaking in ecstasy together with the prophets, the people said to one another, "What's happened to the son of Kish? Is Saul too among the prophets?" But another person there spoke up and said, "And who are their fathers?" Thus the proverb arose, "Is Saul too among the prophets?" And when he stopped speaking in ecstasy, he entered the shrine.
So a story about how, right, there were these bands of prophets walking, in the sense that what they were doing with them was contagious, right? It was in a good way. But if they had this was so alive with them, they're walking around, if you came in contact with it. And I think we can have a little sense of what that would have been like. It's like when we were at the wall, you go there and everybody else is suddenly in the zone. And so you catch, or musical Shabbat here is a little taste of that, Suddenly you can feel there's something going on and you feel alive with it a little bit. And so this is when it's, these are prophets who are walking around with it. So if you were open in that moment and you're suddenly with the prophets, then you catch a little bit of that too.
What is ecstasy? Speaking in tongues?
I see, and not to be judgmental, but speaking in tongues is like the lowest form of
That's
that.
what I thought, yeah.
But this is, ecstasy is, a sense of being, when you're in musical Shabbat and you're just so happy and
Right.
joyful, and after
Okay.
musical Shabbat, I see everybody with
Right.
big smiles on their faces,
Right.
right? So take that and multiply that, and you just feel so good and wonderful, and
So it's
that's it,
joyful.
joyful. Ecstasy is wonderful, it's joyful. So, and to the point where suddenly you feel you've caught the joy bug, right? And you're suddenly in a really wonderful place,
Yeah.
and you feel like you want to share that. So that's what that is. So actually, let's read on the next text too, because this is a text of Kabbalah, traditional Kabbalah by Glick, who was an early Kabbalist from Spain, and he's talking about how the Shechinah was so important earlier in history. But I think going back to what you were saying, Carol, we're coming now to a point where the Shechinah is a lot more accessible right now too. Also, it's coming back into humanity. So would somebody read for us the second text?
I'll do it.
Sure, thanks.
And sometimes this attribute, sovereignty or malchut, is called the Shechinah, and she dwelt continually with the people of Israel from the time of the building of the Mishkan or Tabernacle. As it states in Exodus 2:18, "Make me a sanctuary and I shall dwell in your midst." And you need to know one great principle. Know that in the beginning of the creation of the world, the essence of the Shekhinah dwelt in the lower worlds. The network of all the creations was built upon a hierarchy of levels. The supernal in relation to the supernal, and the lower in relation to the lower. Therefore, the Shekhinah dwelt in the lower worlds, and because the Shekhinah was below, the heavens and earth were united, and the energy pipelines and sources functioned in their fullness, and energy and light were drawn from above below. And God's presence filled the universe from top to bottom. And the symbol of this is the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Therefore, we find that God was present equally both in the supernal realm and the lower world.
So the when this says the gist of when the Shekhinah is creates this flow of blessing from above to below, but also that it's something that's not automatically there. And that's something that's really key to the understanding of the Shechinah. The Shechinah is this presence that can be individual, that kind of gives us this creativity and its spiritual experience, but it's also kind of present in general. And when it's there, then it's amazing for humanity. It brings blessing. But when that presence is not there, then it's not as good. Things are not flowing down to humanity. Humanity going through dark ages when there's, people going backwards and ethics and morals and all those things. And so it's a sense that it's something, and human beings are partners to try and help create a space for that, at least here in this world, to exist. So it's kind of, it's part of the way the Kabbalists imagine us, humanity, being in partnership with God, that we're trying to make space for the Shechinah to be alive and well, because if not, it's bad for all of humanity, for everything. So we have a central part to play. And maybe very quickly to say how aligned Judaism was back then in its foundations with the feminine aspect. One is the way our calendar is aligned with the moon, and the moon is in every culture aligned with the feminine. All of our holidays are aligned with the moon. If you want to know, if you look at any Jewish holiday, you look outside, it's a full moon, right? And so there's this, our calendar has always been aligned with the feminine. And compared to the ancient world it came out of, we talk about the patriarchs, but there's a lot about the matriarchs, and you want to know who runs the ship. You read the story, that's often the matriarchs in the stories too. And so even from the beginning, our tradition has been very focused on the feminine aspect. So now I want to go into more depth, and we're going to look at different aspects of the Shechinah. And the first is the Shechinah as protection. The Shechinah offers protection to people. And so we had this belief. It's there throughout the whole Bible. Right? This is what the prophets keep saying. If you behave yourself and do everything you're supposed to do, God will protect you. But if you don't, if you're not doing it, God's not going to protect you. And the way we understand it through this lens, it's not that the God is up there with a stick, and when God is fed up with us, he starts beating us, but rather that when we're living the proper way, this protective power of the Shechinah is amongst us and protects us, literally like a bubble protecting us, and protects us from negativity, protects us from allows us to be powerful and brave and strong. But then when we're not living properly enough, that presence leaves and we're no longer able to do that. So there's this, to give one example of that story, is a famous story of King David and Goliath, right? So how is David, this little shepherd, able to defeat Goliath? According to the Kabbalists, it's the Shechinah that gave him that sense of protection and of bravery, right? And if you just read that story, it's actually, you find examples of this throughout the Bible. But in that story, I'm going to read it out to you. I don't think I didn't include it in the sources. But right, so David's this little puny shepherd, and Goliath is this huge man who's every day saying to all the Israelite army, is there anyone among you who is strong enough to face me? And everybody's quaking and nobody wants to, and saying this little shepherd comes up to the king, who's Saul, and he says, I will go and fight the Philistine. So it says, and Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight him, but you are but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. And then David said to Saul, your servant kept his father's sheep, and when there was a lion or a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after him and smote him and delivered him out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and slew him. Your servant killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing that he has taunted the enemies of the living God. And David said, the Lord has delivered me out of the paw of the lion, out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And then Saul said unto David, the Lord shall be with you. And then Saul tries to put armor on David, but David is too small for the armor. David says, I don't even need the armor. So then he goes out to meet the Philistine, and David says to the Goliath in battle, this huge guy wearing this armor, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day will the Lord deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and all this assembly may know that the Lord saves now with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord, and he will give you into our hand. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hastened and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put in his hand in his bag and took a stone and slung it and smote the Philistine in his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead and he fell upon the face of the earth. So the sense of the bravery, the protection that would allow this to happen, this kind of thing, and all the times that the Israeli armies, or even the 6-day war, and suddenly the Israelis are protected and going out there and suddenly doing miraculous things. That's what the Shechinah is considered to do, to provide protection and bravery and creative thinking and all those things that, will help do what we consider to be kind of miraculous. And so one place where I bring it in our synagogue is with the Friday night service, especially the musical Shabbat, where we sing this melody at the beginning, 9999999. So that song is a song that's part of the evening liturgy to the Shechinah. It's a song. It's actually a song calling for the protection of the Shechinah. And so, why is it sung as part of the bedtime Shema? It's in the Siddur. It's because before you go to bed, you want to pray for protection. And the words are, so it's in your packet. If you look at it, it says, B'Shem Adonai Elohe Yisrael, Mimini Michael, U'mismole Gavriel, U'milfanai Uriel, Mi'acharai Raphael, Ve'aroshi Shechinat El. So in the name of Adonai, this is on page 2. I know it's a little wonky, but in the name of Adonai, the God of Israel, to my right is the Archangel Michael. To my left is the Archangel Gabriel. In front of me is the Archangel Uriel. Behind me is the Archangel Raphael. And on my head is the Shechinah, the feminine divine presence. So it's a prayer protection where you imagine the angels surrounding you. And then above your head was the Shechinah, was the feminine divine presence protecting you. Because that's what and this is throughout the whole Bible, right? It says, when God stops protecting the Jewish people, I'm going to remove my Shechinah, my presence from you. What happens after that? Temple is destroyed, people are exiled. Until then, they could hold off the much larger enemy armies of the Mesopotamians and the Babylonians and the Egyptians. But after that, it was over. But the Shechinah is also part of being a protective power, also being a destructive power. And the Shechinah is also considered to be that power that was wielded to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, right? This is the story of Abraham, where Abraham argues with God, please don't destroy these cities, right? Even though they're so evil. So according to tradition, there were 3 angels, this is in Torah, who came to speak to Abraham. And one of them was Raphael, we just read about. The other was Michael, and the other was Gabriel. And according to the Midrash, it was Gabriel who then went and destroyed these 2 cities with fire and brimstone, right? And so what was that? Gabriel is associated with the Shechinah. So the Shechinah came, and the Shechinah is this power that has the ability to destroy. According to tradition, it's the plagues were also wielded by the Shechinah. But it's not only to destroy, also, the walls of Jericho falling. This gives you a sense of how this energy also works, right? He went around the city of Jericho blowing the shofar. This is Joshua, for 7 days, blowing the shofar. The energy built and built and built. And finally, on the last day, they blew the shofar, and everybody jumped up and landed, and suddenly the walls of Jericho came falling down. So the sense of that this is throughout the Bible, the sense of this powerful force that can be wielded. But it's not only wielded as a negative to destroy, but it's also in our own beings when you try and destroy the old to bring in the new. So we have many statements like this in the Torah. God is a consuming fire, right? And sometimes you have to destroy even what's inside yourself. The old as therapists here, you have to destroy the old ways of thinking or shift them to bring in the new ways of thinking. And so the sense of God is a consuming, this is the power that takes away the old and it brings in the new in a powerful way. So let's actually, we're going to read on to source number 4. Can somebody read source number 4, please? This is about the protective power of the Shechinah that's often linked to the eagle. The eagle is an image of, right, like the Shechinah is over us, kind of watching over us like an eagle. Could somebody read the 4th source?
Move again.
All right, thank you.
Contemplation of a prayer of protection.
Next one. That's one I added there, that some of you guys can read in your spare time if you'd like to.
On
And it's
page
just a way
3,
of
and
invoking the protective
there's
power of the
I have
Shechinah.
1, 2, 4.
There's the next number 4.
Next. Oh, are there 2 number
On
4s there?
page 3,
Okay.
number here.
Oh, sorry.
Joseph, that one?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
next one.
And this attribute called the eagle has a number of eagles, who each have a number of different wings. And they are called the eagles of the chariot. And they all protect and defend Israel, spreading their wings over Israel to save them from numerous troubles. And this eagle, with all of her hosts, called the eagles of the chariot, watched over and protected Israel in Egypt and brought them out from their sufferings. And this is the secret meaning of the verse. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings.
Thank you. So
yeah,
the sense of this presence, like an eagle over you, protecting, defending, sometimes also coming to do that, to destroy. So we have it as an intensifier, as a power of destruction, but also as a protector, but also as I mentioned, this creative sense that intensifies everything. And when you read the Bible, there's so many intense stories because the belief that this Shechinah presence was there. And so one that I love is the story of Jacob, right? Where he steals a blessing from his brother Esau, and then he spends 21 years away, and then finally comes back. We hear that his brother is heading his way with 400 armed men and wants to kill him, right?
yeah.
And that night, Jacob wrestles all night with the angel. And then at the end of this, he's given a new name, Israel, and he comes to face his brother. And in this moment, his brother, instead of killing him, is just overcome with love and embraces him and kisses him, and they make up. And what was that? That's also considered to be the power of the Shechinah, taking that love aspect that was shining within Jacob and was so intense that even though he came with the intention to kill him, he was so taken in with the power of that love that it changed him and he became a different person and it created. So that's kind of the part of the sense of the power of this presence. Stimulates the power of love. It stimulates everything. And so now in the last 10 minutes, what I wanted to talk about is how one brings this into our own lives, this power, because who doesn't want protection? Who doesn't want intensification? Who doesn't want this, having this in their lives, having real live spiritual presence? And so the way that the Jewish mystical tradition understands this is that one can be devoted to the Shechinah, the feminine aspect. One can be devoted to this Shechinah presence in the world. And the way that we do it in the way that's most mainstream Jewishly part of our tradition is in the Friday night rituals and in the Friday night service, and you see it in the prayer Lecha Dodi. So the whole Kabbalah Shabbat service of Friday night was created by the Kabbalists, for whom their whole life was about being devoted to Shechinah. And so this Friday night service it was completely aligned with this. And so all the Psalms before and the singing that we do is about kind of trying to be devoted to this feminine presence and to an alive presence of God. And then in the Lecha Dodi prayer, the whole prayer is about this. So there's part of the prayer where the Shechinah is described as being radiant and alive and full of, with jewels on her and dressed all in white like a bride, while we talk about the bride Shabbat, because that's when the Shechinah is all, when that presence in the world and within ourselves is all flowing, it's like a bride. She's escorted by maidens, she's flowing with all this power. And then there's another part of the prayer where she's described as being lifeless and in the valley of tears, and she's completely down below. And that's when this energy is not being awoken and it's lifeless. And that's a description for what it feels like for humanity when this energy is not awoken. It feels like it's completely down below. It's completely not alive. We feel it's like when our lives feel lifeless and there's nothing flowing within it, and we just feel like ugh. And so, what does this in the Shechinah prayer? We say it, but we don't think about it. What are the words that we say over and over in different forms? We say, shake off the dust off yourself, arise, don your glorious garments, arouse yourself, for your light has come, arise, shine. And that's saying to the Shechinah, arise yourself. We're trying to raise this power. We say, awake, awake, utter a song, Uri, Uri, rouse yourself, your light has come, awake, awake, utter a song. So actually that whole prayer is about trying to arouse within ourselves and in this world, this power. And so you can align all of Jewish life to some degree if you have the intention to try and bring this presence into it. Every time you shake a lulav and etrog, every time you do a prayer, every time you do a good deed, if your intention is, I want to bring more Shechinah, more of this divine, I'm doing it in devotion to the Shechinah, then that's what that does. And so the founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov, he would say to the students, everything you do, every single mitzvah has to be for the Shechinah. He says, we should always seclude our thoughts with the Shechinah, that we should only think of our love for her, that she is bound to us and we to her, and that we should be constantly repeating to ourselves, when will I merit to have the light of the Shechinah dwell with me? And if you have that sense, everything I'm doing is to bring this presence which will evolve human beings and myself and make life feel alive, and everything, all the prayers I'm doing, if you walk into synagogue saying, this is my intention for my prayers today, to bring this, and both on Friday nights, and that's why is musical Shabbat on Friday night so powerful, because that's what we're trying, that it's all aligned. The prayers are designed in that way, and the songs, we're not just singing to have a good time, we're singing to try and bring that presence amongst us. And it's not only good for us, but even you feel in our own little small way, when you come out of musical Shabbat or a service and you feel alive with it, you didn't take it into the next few days. And if you meet people, you give a little portion of it to them and they take it. And that's what it's about, right? It's trying to bring that into the world. And you don't walk out of musical Shabbat and then start yelling at somebody, because you feel in a positive space, you feel powerful, that you've got that presence with you. And so that's what that presence does. It's like a shield, it's a protective shield. It's very real. And so the final piece is that this presence is very much associated with certain places. I know we think God is everywhere, but on the other hand, some lands have that capacity, and the land of Israel is one of the places in the world where, according to Kabbalah at least, that presence is really alive. It's why one feels very alive in the land of Israel. But the Rebbe Nachman has this beautiful teaching where he says that we each can be attuned to that presence in the land of Israel, probably everywhere, but especially in the land of Israel. But you have to listen to it. And he says there's different places in Israel, and they all have their different song. And it's like if you have to learn that song of that place. And who was King David, who composed the Psalms? He had learned all the different songs of the different places. He was like a shepherd of songs. And some of the nigunim, the melodies that you sing, they were tuned to a place and a time. And if you learn the song of this hill or the song of this mountain, and you're bringing that presence out, you're like in tune with that presence. And I think we know there's different nature places that we each feel super attuned to. And when you're attuned to it, it's like you're saying, you are totally in tune with that place. You're also bringing out the presence, the feminine, the divine presence that's locked there, and bringing it out into the world.
It's like when Julie Andrews was singing Sound of Music.
Exactly. It's like we all have moments where we feel like that. There's different places where we love the nature in this place, and you're connected to the nature. You're not only connected to it, but you're bringing out its sense into the world. Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi, pre-state Israel, Palestine at the time, what he believed was that the Jewish people, we are ourselves part of the Shechinah. We're planted in the Shechinah. So we have an attunement to this energy, because that was our purpose from the very beginning, was to bring this presence into the world. And so we have an attunement that's part of our practice and our tradition. And we're planted in it, so to speak, and the land of Israel is attuned to it. It's not the only presence. There are all kinds of other energies and presences in the world, but it's very much attuned with Judaism. And so patriarchal on the outside, but within the inside, this is our inner focus, to bring this presence into the world, the presence that helps the world evolve and us evolve. Finally, what does this force do? It's a uniting force. It unites matter and spirit, unites heaven and earth. And everything that we do it invites the upper Sefirot and the lower Sefirot. If we're speaking in the language of Kabbalah, all the different countenances. And finally, we don't have a temple anymore, right? The temple was a story 2,000 years ago, but the Baal Shem Tov believes that the third temple is in our own hearts. So our hearts, our own bodies and minds, is a space where we can make room for this presence, for the feminine divine presence. And when we do that, then we create a space for the Shekhinah to dwell in our lives, and then we bring it to the people around us, to our community, and to the whole world. So I want to end by singing that song, because a lot of us know the melody. It's in the pack. It's back on the second page, the one that's upside down. And this is the melody we sing at the beginning of musical Shabbat and of many Friday night services. And again, the words are in the name of Adonai, God of Israel. To my right is Michael, to my left is Gabriel, in front of me is Uriel, and behind me is Raphael, and on my head is the Shechinah, the feminine divine presence. Hashem Adonai Elohim Yemini Chayim Umismoli Gabriel Umilfanai Uriel Umeachai Raphael Ve'al Roshi Shechinah Lai 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 Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really, really good. Thanks.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Good time.
Yeah.
Question about fearlessness.
Sure.
So I always thought that like great religious leaders, like say Martin Luther King,
Yeah.
were not feeling protected, but more fearless because they had a higher belief that God was going to be there for them, whatever happened.
Yeah.
You see that play out in smaller examples, but that's when everyone can sort of hear that. And this seems to sense a different way, that you're being protected as opposed to you're not afraid. And I always saw it the other way, that you're just not afraid because you're not afraid of your enemy because you're working for a higher power, but
Really interesting, right? Maybe they go together, that your
Yeah.
faith draws down. I mean, I think it is, what's fearlessness? It's also a sense of feeling protected, it's like fear, when you feel completely fearless, like true fearlessness is because you feel protected. And I think that we all have moments in our lives where you don't feel fear at all because I just feel very safe and protected. And so maybe their faith draws down that sense of feeling protected and maybe of being protected, but maybe just of feeling protected too. And that allows them also to be fearless and to not feel all the dangers and not feel all the worries and not feel all the things because your faith is so powerful and drawing down. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think